I'm the chair of the Shadow Freezone board for the Plymouth and South Devon Freezone. I think the journey thus far since the announcement that we were selected as one of 8 has been challenging. A lot of hard work, but significant and wonderful partnership working as well. So just a quick thank you, firstly, to Jackie this morning for, well, I would have said this for hosting us at City College, but thank you for being here, Jackie, to introduce and open the event, and also to Stewart and the Chamber team, and Claire Doyle, our communications and stakeholder lead, for helping pull this together and amending it at such short notice. Even though we're only doing this online, I can still see we got 68 participants. We had about 80 registered, so there's always a few fallouts at events. So that's a really good representation. And thank you all for getting up early on a Friday morning to join us. I lose track of time if I'm being perfectly honest, but last Friday, it was only last Friday, we did reach a really important milestone. We submitted our outline business case to the Department for Levelling Up Homes and Communities, and that was a significant next step in the Freezone development. It was, I have to say, pulling that together over the last few months wasn't straightforward. It wasn't easy. It was challenging. But then, if something is easy and it isn't challenging, quite often it's not worth doing. So, I think a big thank you to everyone who's been involved in doing that, and particularly to the close cooperation between the 3 local authorities, ourselves, South Hams and Devon have worked incredibly well together on this, and also the private sector partners, the core partners, which obviously will expand and grow as the Freezone develops, but in particular Langage Energy Park and Babcock and Princess Yachts, and also the Sherford Consortium, as well as colleagues at the LEP, the Heart of the Southwest LEP, and the 2 universities of Plymouth and Exeter. As a partnership, we've really, I think, made massive strides in taking this to the OBC stage. And as Jackie and Stewart have both alluded to, the opportunities that come with the Freezone will be significant to levering new opportunities into our local economy and sub-regional economy. And indeed, it builds upon, and I think this is one of the reasons we were successful in our initial bid, it builds upon the investments and the assets that we've already got in the city. It builds upon things like the city deal, which was a Devon, Cornwall and Plymouth city deal, which started back in 2012. And that city deal enabled us to start our journey of development of redundant sites, most noticeably South Yard in the naval base. And if no one's ever been down into the South Yard site, the enterprise zone there, where partners such as Babcock and City College and many other businesses are now located, I think that's testimony to the success thus far of the city deal programme, and was a key lever for developing our Freeport bid. So the South Yard site incorporates the Oceans Gate enterprise zone, and that will be further developed as part of this as an innovation hotbed. And also we'll be working with the likes of Princess, who are located down there, to expand their capabilities as well. And at Langage, we'll increase industrial and manufacturing space. We're looking at development with Langage Energy Park for hydrogen plant as well, and a mobility hub to promote sustainable and low carbon transport, which will support the Freezone and the wider city and sub-region as well. And at Sherford, a logistics hub is being proposed for integrated warehousing, storage, engineering space, and so on. As part of the package of investment, the overall money from government and the benefits that accrue due to the retained business rates, etc., we will have about a £50 million worth of infrastructure spend available to us for infrastructure improvements, which will enable to unlock those 3 sites I've just referenced and provide seed capital, and also some enhancements around our ports as well. So that's kind of a very brief helicopter overview, but there's a lot more to be done between now and the next milestone, which will be the submission of our full business case, which is in the early mid-April. So no sooner do you let the ink dry on one bit of work, it all then starts again. So the team had a weekend off, and now they're going again from Monday of this week. And the overall aim, I'm sure you've seen this either in the press or you've heard people like myself or others say this before, but it's to attract inward investment into the area, stimulate growth, deliver many thousands of new jobs, and provide economic uplift across the wider sub-region. Doing this will not be possible without the input, the support, and the imagination and innovation of the business community. And as we develop the Freeport, the opportunity to establish new enterprises will flow. So today is the beginning of the next phase in its development of the FBC, and its next phase in our dialogue with the business community as we develop that case over the next months. So hopefully people quite often ask me, well, when will this thing start and become real? We hope that the Freezone will be operational by next summer. There's an awful lot of stuff that still needs to be done, but that's the aim. So one thing I would ask you to do today is draw your attention to the QR code that's been shared with you. And if you could complete the survey there, that will help us with some of our work going forward. And I think that's all I really wanted to say, Stewart, apart from apologies that I've got other things I have to get away for this morning, so I won't be here all morning with you. And I also think the next speaker is Luke. And I don't know if you're introducing Luke, Stewart, or I just hand over straight to him. But just anyway, thank you, Luke, for being with us today. Obviously, part of the Freezone is within Luke's constituency, the South Yard Oceans Gate site. Gary Streeter MP spoke at the last event, and Luke is going to give us some thoughtful words, hopefully.
So my name is Stavros Karamperidis. I'm a lecturer in maritime economics and head of the Maritime Transport Research Group at the University of Plymouth, but I also wear a second hat, and I'm the chairman for the Charter Institute of Logistics and Transport for Devon and Cornwall. So the overall presentation I'm going to give today is going to try to help everybody to understand how logistics, in broad sense, could help to unlock all that kind of opportunities that exist in the region. So give me a second, let's make so we can make move. So an agenda quickly. I'm sure that you're very well familiar about what a Freeport or Freezone is, but I just give a very brief overview. The importance of the logistics infrastructure and how that can help the blue economy to grow, as it comes with the green, because green is everywhere. We've seen that with the COP agenda. What are the needs? Then I'm going to introduce a short survey that we're having and we're running with the City Council. So we want to understand better the freights, container movements in the Devon and Cornwall region. And then I'm going to try to bring some conclusions and probably generate some discussion. So the Plymouth and South Devon Freezone, as you know, it's going to be a simple commercial and regulatory environment to accelerate clean growth. And that is super important. That's why I've highlighted, because as you know, after COP, we really have to make investments that are going to help to talk about green sections. So we have to think about how we can create greener economies for marine defense and engineering and manufacturing groups that are well embedded in a region and provide high quality jobs. So it will create public and private sector partnerships, as it was already aforementioned. And that, of course, in theory, is going to create further innovation, research, and it's going to attract global investment. So that is going to provide a lot of supply chain opportunities for the Southwest region. And having in mind that kind of opportunities and the overall trade that hopefully we're going to see after the establishment of the Freeport Freezone, then we really have to start thinking about how we can support that kind of opportunities, how we can support all that kind of activities with a greener environment. So it's not only about creating clusters that they can subsidize or support the overall movement of the goods, but how we can do that more efficiently and more economically and more eco-friendly. So we really have to do that with new mindsets. We really have to upskill our workforce, because we really need to invest in new technologies. So for instance, we're talking about ammonia or other new fuels or electrification of the fleet, because if we don't have that kind of new skills or we don't use that kind of new fuels, then it would be impossible for us to decarbonize our supply chain and our overall operations. And that kind of overall movement is going to drive the economic growth across the region, which is going to create thousands of jobs, as we discussed earlier on. So we really have to uplift the overall investment and talk about the overall economy and the opportunities it's going to generate. But as you can see, I'm trying to highlight on my slides, and those actually bullet points that were taken from the business case report was submitted last Friday. We're talking about supply chain opportunities, we're talking about decarbonization, and of course, we're talking about upskilling the workforce. So those are kind of a key parameters so we can make the overall thing come together and we can create a kind of synergy that is needed from various businesses in the region so we can go forward. And in a very quick nutshell, Freeport in theory, it's very simplistic, is going to bring growth to the region. Why? Because low tariffs on most goods, and that's going, of course, to encourage domestic production by letting firms to bring tax-free or tax with a lower tax goods. So big manufacturing is going to be produced here in the UK, hopefully, and that's going to shift movement from the European supply chains. So we really have to make sure that we really have the right supply chain to support the overall activities going to take place. I totally agree with the previous speakers that we're not going to talk about massive quantities of goods, but still with the new carbon tax levies that are coming along, we really still have to develop an infrastructure that's going to be future-proof and is going to be also environmental friendly. And that's why in the overall concept, I think logistics is going to be taking place in a very central role. And that's why I try to put logistics in the overall, in kind of the slide, in the center of the slide here, because I think they're going to supercharge the local economy. We have marine defense and space. Those sectors are having very good integration. However, as you know, complex manufacturing is taking place. A lot of spare parts are being sourced from various places of the country and from overseas. So we really have to find out ways of how we can bring those spare parts or various components needed as effective as possible and as in terms of cost and environmental footprint. So that's why we really have to start thinking strategically about logistics infrastructure and how we can develop that in the overall Plymouth Freeport Free Zone. And I think the Free Zone presents a unique opportunity to level up, address any kind of historical challenges that we're having in the overall region in terms of the economic transformation and how we can generate new jobs, as we said, offshore production of energy and all that kind of stuff. So we can see a synergy of blue and green economy coming together, because we can have a lot of blue jobs being generated from the waterfront and from the nearby activities within the sea. But we also have to make sure that those kind of activities are being supported with green initiatives, so we're not harming the environment and we're not harming also the locals living there. So, for example, the overall customs that are existing over there, they really have to be part of the Freeport zone, and by storing that kind of components in locally, that will help local businesses to ease their overall operations and also reduce any kind of shocks that they're having. Because I'm quite sure that you have noticed the last couple of months, even those who are not really familiar with the maritime sector and the logistics, that the logistics are hitting the headlines, especially in terms of business, quite often. And that's because at the moment, we're not, logistics is something important. You've seen the Ever Given events back in March, what kind of nightmare has brought not only to the UK businesses, but all across the globe. We've seen what is happening with the shortage of truck drivers at the moment, which is, is bringing our Christmas supplies and deliveries to our knees. So that's why logistics is super important, because we're hearing constantly from various businesses around the UK and around the globe that by missing a spare parts, for example, automotive industry at the moment, they're facing huge delays and problems because they're missing some components which are called chips, and they cannot produce the final product, which is the car. So we don't want to create an environment or having kind of drag the overall operation manufacturing happening here. That's why we really have to develop good facilities in terms of logistics and storage with warehouses that we can produce and all that kind of stuff and generate, that they can keep locally the components that we need in order to produce the goods needed. And I was trying to make it a bit more interactive because I was hoping that we're going to be in front of you, but I'm going to give you a bit more data now as I'm talking, rather than trying to create a poll, because doing it through Zoom is a bit more, is not as easy to execute. But for those who are not familiar, and I'm sure most of you are, UK, by 95% of the international freight is coming by sea. And as you can see from the slide, 76% is coming by road. So that means that we really have to develop good systems, regardless if, as the dear MP said earlier on, that yes, we're not going to build the overall free port around the port, but still we need the infrastructure so we can support the businesses. We really have to make sure that goods that are coming in and out the country, either we export or import, we really have to come here effectively. And that's why we really have to look holistically to roads, rail, and ports at the same time. And the first thing that's, it's really important to keep a look, especially for our region, is that we have a road network that is kind of uncongested. And as you can see, that comes straight from the Department of Transport. As you can see, our region is totally uncongested. So we really have to think that if we're going to import stuff and we're not using the local ports or the local facilities, that means that if we're bringing stuff from Felixstowe, Southampton, Bristol, or wherever else they're coming, you will see that they're having a lot of delays. And those delays are causing issues to the supply chain. Number one, cost, because truck drivers have to wait there and they're being stuck and waiting for a long period of time. And number two is environmental issues, because if you're stuck in a motorway and the engine is still running, that means that you're emitting a lot of CO2 emissions, which is not good for your overall supply chain. So yes, we have a very good network, but unfortunately that network, when it comes to the rest, it usually has to pass through congested areas. So if we can try to unlock that kind of great network that we're having here, that is not congested, at least road network, then we can achieve a lot of capabilities. Rail, you know it better than me. Rail network is not, we're not well connected with the rest of the UK, and we're totally outside the strategic corridors. You see that the strategic corridors of the country are Midlands to Southampton, Felixstowe, London. So as we mentioned, as it was mentioned earlier on, our case is unique because of the geography as well, and I think that's something really important. And because of the geography of the region, I tried to create a small SWOT analysis based on some initial facts that we have found from the literature and all that kind of stuff. And considering logistics, of course, having always logistics in mind, we can see that the strengths of the free zone here, it's a unique cluster of defense, maritime, and space sector that are well embedded in the area. And we have the skills to support that kind of sectors. And when we're talking about skills, I'm talking also about the institution providers that they can support knowledge, they can upgrade the people. So we have all that kind of skills and knowledge embedded in the region. So that's great news. And we also have opportunities. Yes, from our perspective, the remote geography could be something negative, but at the same time, we can explore the opportunity of a modal shift. The government is pushing further for modal shift. When I'm talking about modal shift, is moving freight from road to other modes, specifically to water. Why that? Because if you really want to achieve the net zero strategy, that should be that should happen only by moving big chunks of freight from road to water. And that, of course, as you can see, can happen by avoiding congestion of other ports. So for instance, for those who are following the news, Felixstowe at the moment is packed for various reasons, and one of them is COVID, and that's why a lot of shipping companies like Maersk, for example, they bypass it. They're not even stopped to leave their containers there. So it's not only the land congestion that exists, there's maritime congestion as well. For those who are following the maritime news, you may have heard that the port of Los Angeles has 80 plus vessels queuing outside the port. And same story happens with the big ports around Europe. So that's why by using other modes of other ports in the region, by using also our local port here, I think we can bypass that kind of logistical problems. Of course, we have some weaknesses, as it was mentioned before, remote location, more extensive transport is needed, availability is limited compared to Midlands. So, it's not as easy sometimes to find a lot of transport resources. long rail and rail distances, so more emissions have been emitted, and we don't have previous experience of bringing everything together and trying to work everything together. Threats for the overall project, that could be that other ports can create that kind of efficient infrastructure, and they can probably try to underestimate or underpin what we're doing over here. Give me a sec. So we really have to focus, as I said, to cost and environmental benefits, because that's the future. And if we're trying to design something for the next 10, 15 years, which is the case with the free ports, we really have to start thinking about which modes are we going to use and why. And as you can see, I try to place here a footprint of each mode that we're using in order to move goods around the globe. And as you can see, shipping has the best environmental footprints. So trying to change the overall logistics network, trying to change the overall logistics mindset, and trying to collaborate everybody together so we can consolidate cargo, and we can create a viable shipping route from Plymouth to the rest of Europe or to other ports, which I'm going to talk later on through various maps. That will help us to reduce the overall emissions and make the overall operations more efficient. And why is that? Because as you can see, the fleet of the vessels is getting younger and more environmental friendly. And that helps us to achieve the economies of scale, and at the same time to reduce the CO2 emissions. And of course, that is not only for dry bulk and liquid bulk that we have heavily here, but that can be also in containers and RoRo that we can potentially try to explore in the port of Plymouth. And how we can explore that by applying short sea shipping. And as you can see from that graph, there are countries in Europe and of course Norway and Turkey that 2009 is the green bar. I hope you can see it clearly. Purple bar is 2018 and the blue one is 2019. And as you can see, the last couple of years, they're using short sea shipping tremendously. The amount of short sea shipping has increased over the years. And that's why, because we're trying to achieve, to get the environmental and economic benefits that shipping can bring. Unfortunately, that's not the case in the UK. And I think Freeport here in Plymouth can help us to move to that kind of direction that is needed, and it's been already addressed from the UK government, that we really have to start moving goods by sea, because that is the most economically viable way. And that's kind of a breakdown. As you can see, Plymouth is in that kind of Atlantic Ocean region of the European Union states. As you can see, we have a good mixture of containers and RoRo. So it's up to us, up to the Freeport cluster, to decide what kind of mode of maritime mode we need to move our goods from anywhere around the globe to anywhere around the globe. And that is beneficial because it gives us more opportunities. And as you can see, in terms of containers movement in short sea, still United Kingdom is doing really bad. And that is going to be also another good point, that we can get support from the government and say, in order to achieve the green deals, the COP26 initiatives, we can achieve that easily by following what other countries have done. Look what happened with Spain and Germany and Belgium. They have managed to accelerate that kind of need. And we really have to keep in mind that Plymouth, yes, I know it's a small port, it's not like anywhere near Humber or Southampton, doesn't even move containers at the moment. So talking about containers is something real in the future. But that's what we're here for, talk about the future and try to make strategic decisions about that. So at the moment, the Port of Plymouth is moving nearly 1,000,000 tons in 2019, and is already trading with a lot of countries. You can see Belgium, Bulgaria, Estonia. It's a huge list of countries that we're already dealing with. So we have the know-how on doing that kind of operations. So that could give opportunities for local business. And as you can see, that's kind of, I put on the right-hand side the map of the free ports around the UK. And as you can see, that is kind of representing the middle map that is demonstrating the activity. You can see that we have a lot of activity in the northeast, Tyne, Humber. That's why we have two free ports here. Then we have London, Southampton, Felixstowe cluster. Also another free ports here. Of course, we have a lot of activity in Midlands, and that's why there's another free port. And of course, as you can see, Liverpool is doing the same. So that's why it's a free port there. The activity that is happening here in Plymouth, we can easily, in Devon and Cornwall, we can easily be captured from from the local ports and by enhancing the overall operation. So we can try to utilize the local ports facilities. There are some, of course, they may need to be upgraded. Those can achieve huge environmental and cost benefits, and that could happen by utilizing the overall short sea shipping in the UK. So we can have, for instance, a network between the free ports that can use to move cargo from road and rail and help us to achieve that kind of decarbonization is needed. So short ship can help to connect those free ports, and those free ports can boost, supercharge the UK economy. So in combination with the border controls and the reduced cost needed for movement of the goods, then we can really create something unique that's going to help and benefit the UK economy. So we can create a unique ecosystem that is future-proof. And for example, line gates, as you know, there is a land. The land has proximity to rail and road. So what would probably is going to be very good is to see how new energies, as you know, there is going to be plans for hydrogen that's going to be provide low carbon transport energy for various modes of transport modes. So if we try to think holistically of building all the various modes, then that is going to help us to unlock the opportunities that are existing in the region. But in order to do that, we really need to understand how much freight we have in the region, how much container movement we have in the region, so we can plan accurately. Some initial research, some initial discussions I had with various people in the region, they're talking about 300 to 400 containers to move to Devon and Cornwall, and Clay is moving a lot of them. But please, if you can help us, if you can participate in that survey and say, for example, how many containers you move per week in the region and how the Freeport free zone can help you to tackle that kind of issues, that would be super beneficial, because by having a clear idea of how many containers have been used or what kind of freight needs you have as a business, that will help us to understand better what kind of infrastructure we need to improve and implement. In concluding, commercial port of Plymouth, Ketterwater, Mill Bay moves annually 2.5 million tons, more than 1,000 pilot moves. So they have the knowledge. Turnchapel is a center of excellence for maritime autonomy and autonomy vessels. That's great, and is going to improve and to increase even further. Port of Plymouth has accreditation from DFT for a quality strategy and invest in monitoring. So that's also great from the environmental perspective. Of course, we have to think that more cargo that we're going to bring in the region because of the free zone initiative is going to increase the CO2 impact and is going to increase the congestion. So we really have to think how to move cargo environmental friendly without affecting the local society. And short sea shipping can help us to do that because it's going to remove trucks from roads. Final point, and I hope I haven't bored you too much with a lot of repetition of what has been discussed already. We really have to think now the future. And I think that is a great opportunity to do it now by bringing together great minds of the region and by talking about what the actual needs are at the moment and what will be in the next 10 years, so we can plan ahead collectively. And as it was mentioned earlier on, only if we're going to work together with the 3 Cs, that would be super beneficial. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, please let me know. You can easily find me through social media or through the university website. Happy to talk anytime about anything you have in mind. Thanks.
I suppose the first thing to say is absolutely fantastic that the free zone is coming to town, but we really do need to work together to make sure this happens. And as Luke said earlier on, absolutely strategic partnerships, collaboration to make this work. So huge piece that you gave me to cover off: skills, recruitment, labour shortages, and there is an awful lot to talk about. So I'll start, I'm going to start with this first slide, and then I'm going to hand over to Phil, and then I'm going to continue. So as you can see on the slide there, we've got 4 primary skills and employment outputs being sought in terms of the free zone at present. That's jobs created, people being upskilled, gaining level 2 to 6 qualifications. And one of the critical things in this particular area is the fact that we have a number of people who don't actually have a level 2 qualification. And we need to really look at how we can overcome that. Also the unemployed, the inactive, securing employment. So how do we actually reach these people? And also the additional learning space secured. So that's actual additional skills infrastructure, which will be very much needed. As you can see, it's no figures against any of these metrics yet. I was very, very pleased to hear that there was a differentiation between skills and labour, and we'll come on to some of those in a moment with these our next slides, because the two things are very, very different. I'd like to pass over to Phil now, who's going to touch on some of the outputs and some of the stats. So could I have the next slide, please? And hello, Phil.
Thanks, Sharron. Yeah, morning, everyone. Yeah, Sharron spotted I was on the call and I'd actually provided some of these numbers, so she thought it might be best if I spoke to them. Yeah, as we've talked about, the free zone is a huge opportunity in terms of both employment and skills over the next 10 to 15 years. And actually, it's probably worth just reflecting on what it creates and what it actually does over the next period. So all in all, around 3,500 jobs. The figures are actually slightly higher now. They're 3,546. There's about 2,000 new jobs in there, and there's about 2,000 jobs that might have been created anyway as part of the existing activity at South Yard and around Langage and Sherford. Across the three sites that we know of around the Freeport, it's around 1,000 jobs, 2,000 jobs at each of the Sherford and Langage sites, and around 500 jobs over at over in the Oceans Gate on top of the ones that have already been created. What does that look like in terms of jobs? What are we talking about? If we move to the next slide, we're talking about high value. We're talking about high tech. We're talking about the kind of jobs that we as a partnership and we as partners around the Southwest have been seeking to create through these projects over the last 20 years. We're looking at marine trades. We're looking at electrical. We're looking at green. We're looking at energy. We're looking at high value logistics. And we've just heard about that in the previous piece. We're looking at some of that operational and project management piece that we know that we do so well and that Plymouth's got so many skills in. And it's about trying to move those forward. And the numbers are significant. You're talking 400, 500 marine engineers. You're talking 200 to 300 electricians and high value electrical engineers. You're talking around 1,000 project management staff across multiple disciplines, whether planning, whether logistics, whether production. These are the kind of jobs where they're going to be above the national average, they're going to be above the Plymouth average, they're going to be above the wider Southwest average across Devon and Plymouth over the next few years. And if we move on, that leaves us with a bit of a challenge. If we go to the next slide. Thanks. It leaves us with a challenge because as we've already touched on, I know Sharon's going to touch on in a minute, skills is a huge area for us in terms of making sure that we've got the right people for these opportunities going forward. We've got demand side problems, which I know Sharron will touch on, but actually creating the skills and creating the individuals to take these jobs forward is going to be a huge part of the challenge over the next few years. So 3 priority areas that we've been focusing on around the free zone. There's the initial construction piece. To actually bring the free zone forward, you've got to build it once the business plan's gone through. And that requires us to look at both the construction skills on site, but also those skills that are going to be needed around the estate, around that wider development piece, and around that long-term piece within the construction sector with a green, sustainable focus. That's a big focus around the hardest hit as well. What we want to do through this project is make sure that we're reaching out through these jobs to those that are furthest from the market in Plymouth and in Devon. Then you move on to the free zone employment itself. And that's around making sure that we've got the right people for those jobs, for those marine jobs, for those green jobs, for those high value jobs over the next few years. And as part of that, there's a big piece about making sure that we've got the right skills for the marine and the wider sector development piece. Marine is absolutely fundamental in some of the stuff that's coming forward. And when you look at the way that the jobs play out, making sure that we've got that marine skills offer is going to be a huge, huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity for us over the next decade. Now, within the bid, there are some ways that we're going to be looking at that. There's a Marine Skills Centre, which is in there as an ambition, working with the colleges across the piece, City College Plymouth, South Devon, Petroc and others, all of which are working around the marine sector at the moment, and they've got a presence in and around the Devon and Plymouth area. There's also the Marine Technology Centre, which I know others are going to talk about a little bit later, which then segues into that around those high level skills, those innovation skills, and making sure we've got that fit between marine skills and engineering skills of today and the marine skills and engineering skills of the future. So this is a really dynamic project in terms of skills and employment. It's looking at really adding that value to the local area. So what are some of the challenges we're facing? Where do we sit today? And Sharon's going to do the next slides, but I'm going to start with just something around the intelligence that we received. So if we move to the next slide. So as it stands, it's quite a challenging environment to be taking on a project like this, as we all know. We know from employers that demand at the moment is through the roof. There is more recruitment demand than there has ever been. Sharon will talk about some of the statistics there. We know that employers believe that Brexit has had an impact on the ground, and that has created new challenges around labour that we're starting to see. And we know that early retirements and some of the changes we've seen through COVID have had a demand. We know that about 30,000 people have moved out of the labour market across this bit of the world, Plymouth and Devon and Torbay, over the last year and a half, mainly because people have, through the COVID crisis, have decided that they want to go and do other things. Now that creates new challenges for us in that some of those retirees will have had high value skills in some of the sectors that we really want to bolster now. So it creates that skills gap and that demand gap and accelerates it. We know that some employers are expecting government to do the right thing, to use their exact words rather than my own on this, and that they're looking for them to fill that labour gap. But we know that that's not the way that government's approaching it. Government's approaching it by saying, no, we must train our own, we must grow our own, we must focus on that skills and employment piece. Now, we know that those events and some of the things that we've seen over the last year or so are going to continue. We know we're going to have some labour market challenges. But the focus coming through and the focus for the Freezone, which Sharron will now touch on, has got to be around skills and employment. It's got to be around creating those opportunities, training our young people and our adults in work, which make up 70% of the workforce for the future, to make sure that we've got that skills profile and that the Freezone will be that high value success that we're all seeking. So I'll stop there and I'll pass back to Sharron, and she's going to touch on, I think, the wider situation and then where we are with the provider network. Sharron?
Thank you, Phil. Can I have the next slide, please? So this slide really shows the current demand, the vacancies that currently exist. And demand for jobs, as you know, is absolutely reaching critical proportions. We're seeing businesses that are having to work on reduced opening hours because they just can't find the right staff, or they don't have enough staff. They don't have enough labour. We currently have more than 76,000 vacancies across the area, and that is of real concern. And when we look at apprenticeships across the Freezone area, we have more than 500. Now, those were ones that I found last night on the Find an Apprenticeship site. There actually are probably more than that, because not all apprenticeship vacancies are put onto that particular government website. So more than 500 apprenticeship vacancies, and employers are absolutely desperate to fill those. So you can see the demand side here. We can see the number of vacancies increasing and increasing rapidly. Could I have the next slide, please? So when we look at supply, one of the things to note is that the claimant count has effectively halved since Easter. And you can see from the chart here that it has dramatically dropped. So that means to say that most people who want to work, are able to work, are in work. So we've got very high levels of employment, which we would applaud normally. But with Brexit, with COVID, what we are seeing is a lack of people to fill those vacancies. So the intelligence suggests that the end of furlough didn't have the impact that we thought, and that most people have just returned to work. Could I have the next slide, please? And when we look at the supply side in terms of working age population, what COVID seemed to do was, we've seen that the economically active population has fallen by around 30,000 individuals during and over the pandemic. And what we're hearing is that lots of people have decided to take early retirement. So the pandemic hit, people started either working from home or they were put onto furlough, and they realised that actually they could exist on perhaps a pension or savings, and they're not going back to work. The rate of decline across the piece that we're talking about today, Devon, Plymouth, Torbay, is far faster than anywhere else in the country. So we can see some pretty big stats here. You know, the number stating they don't want a job has increased by 23,000 over the last year. That's a 25% increase. And all of this helps form a perfect storm. Also, the Brexit issue, you can see there around 5,000 to 10,000 individuals no longer working or no longer in work, thought to be EU residents. who have left and yet to return, if they ever will return. And you can also see there the number of those self-employed has also dropped by around 20,000. And that's partly due to retirements, also seeking or having confidence in going into PAYE work due to the pandemic. Could I have the next slide, please? So when we look at young people, so when we're talking about the free zone and the opportunities, and there's a fantastic opportunity here, we look at our young people. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a huge surge in youth unemployment, but the tide has turned. Many young people took the decision to go and study at a college or an independent training provider, undertake a study program rather than going into the world of work, rather than taking up an apprenticeship. They felt safe and they felt more confident in actually continuing with their study rather than entering employment, because they didn't know where things were going or heading in terms of the pandemic. So the young people we've talked to, and you know, from the ground, we're hearing that young people have actually adapted to the new world and the new way of working. And as I said, college uptake is up quite significantly. I know Jackie Grubb is on the call here from from City College Plymouth today, and I know she would probably echo the fact that she will have seen larger numbers coming through for those study programs. Young people are actually critical for us to actually make sure that we maximise the potential of this free zone. Where are we going to get the labour? Where are we going to get the skilled labour for the future? And it's from our young people. Next slide, please. So clear messages, and opportunities here on this slide. So as you can see, there is a very clear gap between supply and demand emerging following COVID and Brexit. We've got too many jobs available and we've got too few individuals to fill them. Most able, as I said, have already gone back to work. Lower paid but available workforce currently redeployed across the economy. And what we need to do now is look at those that are furthest away from the workplace. How do we engage with them? How do we get them back into jobs and how do we get them upskilled so that they can start adding to the economy and we can get them back into work and support those employers who've got those vacancies. So that focus, as I say, will shift to the harder to reach and upskilling. And that is a really difficult job. It's not easy to do. And a number of you on the call I've worked with over a number of years, where we've thrown money at lots of projects in trying to achieve this. But this time we really need to make this work. And that will only happen if we work together. And the other thing is around the demography of the Southwest. We have an ageing population. We've always had an ageing population, but you can see with the COVID and Brexit, it is, as I say, a perfect storm. We've got people taking early retirement, so we just have less people. Have the next slide, please. So what can we do about that, and what is actually happening? Well, this government is throwing money at skills and has placed skills actually forefront and centre of recovery. And I've worked with Phil on a number of key COVID recovery projects. As I say, there is an awful lot of money sloshing around. And what we need to do is make sure that that money is used in the right way, that we deploy it so that we can make sure that we have the skills that we need as we move forward, and especially for when we're talking about the free zone. So the plan for jobs, you will have heard the plan for jobs. It's a range of government programs, and some of which offer financial incentives to employers. And I'll talk about some of those in a moment. And as I say, they are, you know, the plan for jobs was there to support employers in taking on new employees. But if we don't actually have any employees, we don't have people to take up those jobs, what we're going to do. The skills for jobs is around that lifelong learning piece. So those aged 19 plus without a level 3 qualification. And we talked before about those qualifications. And for those of you who perhaps need level 2 is equivalent to GCSE, a level 3 is equivalent to A level. But we have people who haven't even got a level 2 qualification in this particular in the free zone area. We really need to look at that entry level stuff and those hardest to reach. So the local skills improvement plans, I put that up there, and Stewart and Phil and I and the 4 college principals across Devon have been working together with trying to put together that local skills improvement plan. And even though we were unsuccessful, we are continuing to work as a team, as a group, to ensure that if a second wave comes through, that we are there ready to put in a bid. And as I say, it's all about partnership working. Those local skills improvement plans are really about putting employers at the heart of the skills strategy for a particular area. And employers absolutely have to be part of this. One of the things I want to mention are these four here, which are government initiatives. Kickstart, some of you will have known about Kickstart. Stewart and his team at Devon and Plymouth Chamber are a gateway organisation for Kickstart, and my organisation, Devon and Cornwall Training Providers, have been working very closely with Stewart and the team to support employers in taking on Kickstart and providing that wraparound support. Kickstart's been extended by the government to March next year. We thought it might end in December, but it actually is extended to March next year, and it offers 6-month work placements to young people aged 16 to 24 who are currently claiming universal credit. There's no cost to the employer. The 100% of the wages are paid, and there's also a £1,500 bursary to support with onboarding and additional training if it's required. Traineeships, though, are something that we should be really considering here as a free zone area. Traineeships are very much at the heart of the government's new strategy, and they're about to launch a massive campaign in the new year around traineeships. Traineeships haven't had much uptake in recent years, but as I say, the government are very, very keen for traineeships to become a centre point and act as a platform to progress young people onto apprenticeships or into employment. They're actually throwing quite a lot of money at it. 128 million is being allocated in the 21-22 academic year for 16 to 24-year-olds. So traineeships are really going to be pushed by our training providers who've got funding to offer them. And apprenticeships, again, I would be derelict in my duty if I didn't mention apprenticeships. As I said, there are more than 500 vacancies in the free zone area. Apprenticeships, for those of you who don't know, there's no upper age limit, but they're aged from 16 plus, and they're still very, very good employer incentives for taking on an apprentice. Government, again, extended the incentive, which is £3,000 per apprentice, to January, 31st of January. We are lobbying actually to get that extended further past January, because we think those employer incentives are very much needed. As I said, more than 500 current vacancies in the free zone area across all sectors. And the final one I wanted to mention was T-levels, which are new qualifications that have been brought in. They're equivalent to 3 A-levels, 2-year duration, 16 to 19-year-olds. And again, industry placements play a major part of this. So like the apprenticeships, like the traineeships, the employer plays a huge role. The T-levels, though, we're looking at those higher level skills. And again, as we know, with the free zone, we will be looking at the marine, advanced manufacturing, and T-levels play an excellent role here. As I said, 16 to 19-year-olds, industry placements play a major part, 45 days, and the government have given £1,000 employer incentive to any employer who would host a student on an industry placement, and there's no cost to the employer. So T-levels and traineeships are very much part of that portfolio of skills and training that are available. Could I have the next slide, please? But one of the things that I need to say is that we have we've got a fantastic range of providers in the area offering a range of skills trained from entry level all the way through to degree level. So South Devon College, City College Plymouth, we've got Plymouth University, all within that free zone area, and they have excellent facilities, and they also have amazing network of contacts with employers. We also have a range of independent training providers who also operate across the free zone area, who actually have that niche expertise and knowledge and industry engagement, which we'll support. So I've put here, we have a strong tradition of apprenticeships, but as I said, we have a real need because we've got loads of apprenticeship vacancies and we actually aren't seeing young people taking them up. And why aren't they taking them up? We'll talk about that in just a moment. However, I want to go back to the excellent employer engagement piece, because The colleges and the ITPs do have those fantastic relationships with employers. And what we need to make sure is that curriculum design, the design for the curriculum of the future. What do employers need? What will that free zone area, what will the employers operating in that area, what will they require in the future? We really do need to meet the needs of local employers. And Stewart and his team, I know we've talked about the college business centres and the stuff around the skills accelerator. Although we didn't receive funding, we are still very, very heavily engaged in making sure that we do meet the needs of local employers. So if I could have the next slide, please. So to conclude, partnership working, at the very, very start of this event today, partnership working was mentioned. And that strategic partnership between education and business is absolutely critical. If the free zone is to bring to the table all the opportunities that we know it can, we absolutely need to have those strategic business partnerships between education and business. The curriculum design and delivery, we need early identification of the skills that are required. How do we get young people engaged with some of these new businesses, these new roles, these new jobs? We're seeing new jobs that we didn't even know of 5-10 years ago. And as we look at green jobs, those advanced manufacturing, marine defence, space, who even thought? I went to school in the 1970s. Who thought there would be a role in space that could be offered here in Plymouth? So that careers advice is absolutely critical. We need to promote the sectors, we need to promote the opportunities, we need to promote the free zone and what it will bring to our young people, their parents and their carers. And I really think we need to do some school engagement pre-year 7, because we're looking at the future here. We're not looking at next week, we're not looking at next year. So we really need to inspire our young people. We need to educate our young people and also educate our educators so that they understand about the opportunities that currently or that will exist as we move forward with the free zone. So, you know, thank you very much for inviting us along today. If anybody has any questions, I think, Stewart, you're going to allow us to speak or ask questions at the end. My details are here, so if anybody needs and wants any support in terms of skills, training, government incentives, funding, please do make contact, and thank you very much.
I think before we go too far, I just wanted to say a couple of things. There's been a lot of talk about Plymouth and the free zone, Freeport, and how important advanced manufacturing is. Part of this presentation today is going to be slightly different to the logistics presentation that Stavros put forward. What I'm trying to cover through this is actually how the free zone can play a part largely in clustering and attracting both investment opportunities and then trying to show how that can help overcome some of the current challenges. I know there's been some talk already about government support and what that means, but we've got some data on what government support is being requested from the manufacturing sector. And then finally, I'll look to try and apply that to the Freeport itself. I think it's worth highlighting, though, that there's about 10,000 jobs that are currently in post as employed in the advanced manufacturing and scientific sector within Plymouth. There's a very strong manufacturing cluster that is already in place with the Plymouth Manufacturing Group. And I think there's great opportunities through this to be able to bring some of those existing assets together. Plymouth Manufacturing Group, with the membership it has got, already supports over £2.7 billion worth of turnover with those manufacturers. And that's only a fraction of what's actually there in Plymouth. So the free zone presents an opportunity to basically enhance that capability and build upon it for the future. Next slide, please. So just very briefly, everybody knows what supply chain is, but just in case, I've got a little graphic for you on the right. This is about bringing raw materials from all over the place together to be able to create something that's of a higher value than it started with. But to do that, it needs information flows, it needs services, it needs financial flows, to be able to bring all of this together into form of supply chain. Back in the early 2000s, there was late 90s, early 90s, there was a lot of globalization that went on, and those supply chains have been fractured all around the world. What the free zone potentially provides an opportunity to do is to reconsider those options. The opportunity, and I'll call it an opportunity because we've got to do something and not look backwards, but look forwards around the fact we have left the EU. What opportunities can come forward from that in terms of both the data protocols, the the opportunities with the free ports, the opportunities around potentially trying to simplify some of the certification. Those are the challenges that are both driving barriers from some of those global nations to supply into the UK, but could potentially provide an opportunity for UK firms. And if we can get the support right around the free zone, it could put Plymouth at the front of the queue to try and attract that investment and try and bring, by creating the simplest way and means forward for companies to operate within the area. Next slide, please. So just some of the barriers that are being reported. So we run a national and Southwest survey for manufacturers, which gets more than sort of 500 responses. 96% of firms have been suffering with price increases across their supply chains. And you heard earlier from Stavros about some of the issues around microchips. 93% of those believe that 93% of the respondents believe that the factor that is causing the major issue in price rises is the availability of raw materials, with firms competing with one another to try and drive costs up. Secondly, you can see there it's transportation costs and lack of capacity to meet demand. What you will see is that the free zone, and if we can get the inventory right, as Stavros alluded to earlier, the transportation right, and the capacity right by clustering complementary capabilities together, we've got an opportunity here to try and bring all of this into an area and attract investment in a way that we haven't had the opportunity to do previously. Next slide, please. Equally, there's other factors that have been hindering this: recruitment, packaging materials availability, lack of customer demand, inflation, and some new standards. All of these things need to be worked together. And you've heard about recruitment, you've heard about the need for collaboration. It's going to take multiple parties to work together to overcome all of this. But that is the opportunity. These are the challenges that are being faced around achieving growth. Next slide, please. Specifically, these are some of the actions that are being taken by businesses to overcome those challenges around supply chain and logistics. And what you're looking at is a lot of firms are currently having to extend lead times. They're having to increase stock holding of those key products, purchase in larger quantities or bulk orders, increase their own product prices, expand their supply chain, etc., etc. You can see on the slide. What this means for businesses in the region, though, is that if we put some of this into the context of the Freeport, these are the factors that we need to consider when we're designing what support, what solutions, and what infrastructure can go into this. Because fundamentally, a lot of these issues are the challenges of today. So if we can design the services, the tax incentives for the Freeport in a way to be able to try and overcome that, we should be able to attract further investment, not just from domestic UK supply, but international investment in that way. Next slide, please. Currently, businesses are having to commit between 1 and 2 FTEs to be able to deal with these supply chain challenges. So when we've just heard about the challenges in terms of recruitment, labour availability, when we've got existing businesses committing their skilled staff onto issues dealing with these current problems, actually, there's a potentially massive impact here, because often those businesses, those numbers represent anything up to 10% of the workforce for the company involved. So we can potentially highlight, by solving these things, designing a solution with the free zone to lower those costs and help alleviate some of the potential skills challenges by redeploying those skilled staff from firefighting issues such as this into high value adding aspects of their role. Next slide, please. And again, these are the stats that we've had come through. So a lot of this has been presented previously, so I'll just show that very quickly. For manufacturing, this is what we've had fed back. 62% of the firms believe that it's lack of skilled staff. 56% believe it's shortage of available people, available labour, lack of people in the area. The salary expectations are increasing. You know, we are competing. We talk about high value jobs and the right sort of jobs. I think manufacturing and the skills that we have within this sector provide a really long-term career aspiration and career development path for a lot of people, which we don't really talk about in the same way. But in a short-term basis, when we are competing with very high salary costs for lorry drivers, HGV drivers on a short-term basis, and it's equally as important to try and ensure that we have the right support mechanisms to keep those highly skilled staff in those specialist roles to support businesses, rather than jumping to a short-term urgent need because of challenges within the market. So there's a piece that I think that we can look at through the free report as part of this as well. Next slide, please. These are the things that that businesses, SME businesses, SME manufacturers have been asking for in terms of what incentives would they ask government to help them with if they had an absolute free choice. We've run this over three surveys, sorry. So the first two were completely free open fields, and then we analysed those open field responses to try and categorise them. And then this was the result of the categorisation to be able to put this data into some form of structure. And what you can see quite clearly is that there's greater tax incentives for capital investment. Now, you may argue that some of the schemes announced in the budget and the uplift in capital expenditure allowances could cover some of that, but that's still, this survey was taken long after those were announced. So there's still greater need for some form of tax incentives. And this is, again, if we're looking at high value manufacturing, whether it be in the marine sector, the space sector, the defence sector, one of the barriers to entry is that level of capital investment that's needed to be able to create a very strong, competitive and productive environment for this. Businesses are also looking for product development grants. If you look at if we look at that in the context of the free zone, what that would mean is that we'd have the potential then to bring, to incentivize businesses who can bring and develop new products with the potential for export to be able to relocate there and grow and export, creating again further jobs, further complementary capabilities, enhancing the reputation of the area, and hopefully creating and attracting international firms as well. The third point is quite interesting. You know, a government led by a British campaign. Actually, what can be done to try and help highlight the fact that we do have this wonderful capability that's there, to be able to push that on a coordinated basis, not just from local organisations, but on a wider basis from government, getting both the recognition that was alluded to earlier for the South West and Plymouth, to ensure that the government recognises the capabilities up there. And then I think it's fair to say that the firms we've surveyed, they do recognise that this is not a quick fix for skills, but what they are asking for is longer term apprenticeships through the colleges for manufacturing. So this is about going back in some ways to much longer term activities to try and help promote longer term apprenticeships with the right level of skills development, to make sure that when they're then fully skilled, they've got the breadth of skills that are needed really for today. You can see the other aspects within there, and it starts to lower down. The one that may be worth highlighting specifically is around the UKCA. There is a potential for the free zone, if we can get the logistics right, as Stavros has highlighted, to potentially create a scenario whereby the free zone would allow businesses to bring goods in from abroad, not have to certify them to the UKCA standards, which opens up potential markets from Europe, where businesses may, for specialist materials, for specialist products, where maybe the volumes into the UK market are fairly low, and the demand isn't there to justify the cost of certification itself, but for UK firms to then be able to export back out again on a global basis, utilising some of those materials. And that's one area that might be worth at least exploring as part of this going forward. Next slide, please. So what's the free zone designed to cover? Well, lower tax, simplify customs, improve transport and logistics, innovation, collaboration and co-location. Well, with all of that, that should make a huge difference if we can tailor those offers around what the free zone is designed to achieve to those needs that we've just highlighted. Well, actually, that should address an awful lot of those barriers. And if we can combine that with the skills support that's just been alluded to, we've got the potential to create an environment that can attract employees from all over the area. Because if you've got a, sorry, next slide, please, I should say. If you've got a cluster that starts to form, then actually from a recruitment perspective and an employee's perspective, there's more potential and attractiveness of going to an area where you've got multiple employment opportunities rather than one large employer. And I know in Plymouth, we're very fortunate where we've got Babcock, we've got Princess Yachts, we've got innovative companies coming through and lots of opportunities. But if we can strengthen that and cluster that, that scale becomes bigger, it becomes more attractive, and it can help bring in those staff and employees that we really need. I make no apologies for the fact that the reference on this is more than 20 years old. But what is really interesting about this is we're still going through this. The factors that have changed, however, over the last 20 years, that's the biggest factor on that list on the right-hand side is digital. What was possible 20 years ago through digital and at what cost has changed hugely. So within the Freeport, the free zone, what we're able to do potentially is look at how can we create a digital infrastructure for information sharing, for collaboration, to address these needs, to create information that benefits all of those firms within that area and attract the investment further as well. Next slide, please. So just in conclusion, what do we think, what if we get the free zone Freeport right, what could it do? It could attract talent from further afield more easily because there's multiple opportunities for people with the same skill set. It has the potential through attracting complementary capability to access strong and potentially specialised supply chains. I was reading through some of the chat comments from somebody who's far more experienced in customs excise duty than I am, but we are going to have to define what those specialised opportunities are from this to make sure that we can clear the custom codes and lower it down that way. So we need to highlight those specialised supply chains and build upon it. It can help us to grow both local, regional community. It can generate new, opportunities in new markets and opportunities for businesses, both locally and further afield. If we get this right and we can bring together a cluster, it does increase that potential for collaboration through common standards, common skills development to be able to bring this all together. Again, collaborating and bringing together this cluster and talking as a cluster creates greater potential for government support, whether this through the future funds that have been discussed previously or other schemes that may not yet be announced. And it does provide that opportunity for a focal point for domestic and overseas investment. And as a result of that, if we can create an internationally recognised cluster, the demand will increase because of the cluster's reputation on a global field. So I think for me, the free zone provides a fantastic opportunity. It's about how we bring all that information together to be able to create that positive image that I think Luke talked about right at the beginning, to be able to promote this cluster on an international basis. Thank you.
Okay, so Caroline was just talking about our innovation hotbed, I think. So certainly that is one of our local strengths. And in bringing our free zone bid forward, it was something we really sought to leverage. I think we're extremely strong around innovation in marine. We clearly have a very good defence presence in the city. The space sector is something we're really looking to develop. And in terms of marine, obviously, we're trying to build on our Ocean Futures programme. And as you'll see from the slide there, the idea is then that we leverage our innovation to spin off viable products and an early stage production. And we've then got the right environment in terms of the tax sites at Lancashire to bring in manufacturers to get those products to market, hopefully creating a lot of new products which we'll be manufacturing here in Devon. We've got subsector specialisms within that. Our marine autonomy play is very strong. We're very keen to look into what we can do around marine carbonisation, and you've already heard Stavros talk earlier about short sea shipping. Digital Oceans and our Ocean of Future project, and our project to throw 5G out across Plymouth Sound and to use that as a testing zone. And we've got a lot of interest from people who are interested in testing autonomous offshore platforms in that space. Thank you. So what are the benefits for businesses, first of all, inside the tax and customs site? Well, there's a range of tax incentives, and they're listed there for you. Stamp duty, land tax relief, so anybody making land purchases will benefit from that. Enhanced structures and buildings allowance will ensure that people can build buildings more cheaply than they would be able to elsewhere. The enhanced capital allowances allow people to write off plant and machinery more quickly. Employers' national insurance contributions will be available for jobs, and this kind of links back to the quality employment agenda, because the national insurance contributions apply. To get the maximum from that, then we really need to be bringing quality jobs into the free zone. And the business rates relief will be for firms coming into the free zone for 5 years will not have to pay any business rates, and the local authority will receive a contribution from government to fill up the pot, so to speak. So the business rates relief will be provided at the expense of Her Majesty's government rather than at the expense of local taxpayers. And then we will also have our custom zones within that. And as the slide says, conceptually, the goods in a free zone remain offshore, so you benefit from tariff exemption. If you can bring goods into the free zone, manufacture within the free zone and export again, then there is no UK tariff to be applied. You can benefit from tariff suspension, and this could be something which could be leveraged by people who aren't actually based within the free zone, but they could bring goods for manufacture into the customs site, store them there, and only take them out when they're actually needed, and they wouldn't have to pay the tariff on them until they're removed. So there could be cash flow benefits from that. And then there's this question, rather technical question of tariff inversion, which is where you assemble something from multiple components which you've imported, where the tariff you would have paid on the components is higher than the tariff you pay on the finished product, and you only pay the tariff then on the finished product, so you save a certain amount of tax on that. And what's not on the slide there is you also get to benefit from VAT exemption, so VAT suspension. So again, in terms of cash flow, you only pay the VAT on components or products when they're actually brought into the UK customs territory. This slide is reproduced from DLUC guidance, and it just gives an examples of the kind of benefit you would see. So as it says there, if you were acquiring £700,000 worth of land, you would benefit to the tune of £24,500 on that. And I don't want to read them all out, but clearly there are a significant amount of savings there, which would be accrued by a relatively small business in terms of what we're looking at on the free zone site. The larger the operation, obviously, the more you would be able to benefit from the tax release. Okay, Jasmine, if I can have the next slide, please. We have got 3 main sites, and you can see them there. There's a bit more detail on some of the coming slides, but just in oversight, there's 3 sites at Langage, Southfield and Sherford. We are investing £50 million, £25 million seed capital from government, and £25 million that we will need to match with locally in our preferred option to invest in infrastructure to open these sites up principally. The outline business case we put together does have to include economic and financial appraisal of those investments. And as we move towards our full business case over the next 4 months, we'll be continuing to develop our plans around that. The government is putting a lot of pressure on us to deliver at pace. This obviously is the Chancellor's, I don't want to say pet scheme, but certainly Rishi Sunak is somebody who's been engaged in this for a considerable period before he became Chancellor. The tax benefits are only available for the first 5 years, so there's real pressure on us to deliver quickly so that we can take full advantage of that. We're in the process of talking to landowners about the kind of agreements we're going to need to bring the sites forward, and we're obviously doing quite a lot of local income generating in order to raise the match funding that we need. If I can have the next slide, please, Jasmine. So looking first at the Langage site, this is the biggest of the 3. We've developed a concept master plan, and you can see it set out there for you. So that gives you a sense of what the site layout will look like. These are phases 1 and 2 of the free zone, which we can deliver within that tax break. The purple section we can still bring forward, but we're not able to bring that forward within the tax window. But the bit that we are bringing forward will provide 95,000 square metres of mixed-use employment area across the Langage site, and we'll be delivering that. The 3 phases over the next 10 years. The 95,000 are within the orange and yellow areas, just to be clear about that. we've identified a custom site within language. It's essentially this section, square section within, just to the south of those, for those who know it, of the power station, which is the kind of bite out of the top of the boot, if you like. Just below that section is where the custom site will be located, and there'll be an opportunity there for a large warehouse unit and a large manufacturing unit. I think from memory they're at 35,000 square meters put together. We will be investing in significant new transport infrastructure. All the little pink lines on these are roads that we're going to need to build around the site. There's a small spine road there at the moment which leads down to the power station. Language Energy Park Limited are directly going to develop some of the site directly, and their proposals include a hydrogen plant, which obviously will support low carbon transport, enable us to deliver on our carbon net zero ambitions, or will help us towards them. And a small part of the site is actually owned by Plymouth City Council already. It's where, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, you probably can't, but it's in the toe of the boot almost. If you think where the laces would be on a boot, then it's pretty much around there. We're continuing our work with other landowners. We have a need to acquire some land to the south of the site, and we're in discussion about that at the moment. And we have more work to do, quite a lot more work still to do, designing, testing and costing transport infrastructure, which we'll look to fund 50-50 through seed capital and local generated match funding. Thank you. If I can have the next slide, please, Jasmine. South Yard. So the red boundary there shows you the extent of the South Yard tax site. It contains the Oceanscape development, which you can see pictured in the pictures at the bottom there. The 3 dry dock stands to the left, and the kind of triangle of land which runs off the middle picture. You can just see the base of the triangle there running off towards the right-hand side of the picture. In addition to that, we have 2 of our anchor tenants, Babcock and Princess Yachts, based within that area, and they have plans to develop and expand their facilities there. So we'll be looking at building boats and ships in the South Yard again, bringing shipbuilding back to Plymouth, which will be a great thing, and securing a very significant number of jobs that are already there, as well as generating a significant amount of new employment. And there are still opportunities. There's plenty of land within that zone which still needs to be developed, and that will be within a secure setting, so behind the wire, if you like, alongside the Ministry of Defence and their contractors. Thank you, Jasmine. If I can have the next slide, please. And last but not least, the Sherford site. The Sherford site is mainly going to be the site of a new integrated logistics hub. We're looking at 32,000 square metres of high-tech logistics space, and the Sherford Consortium are in quite advanced negotiations with a possible tenant for that site, and it will be designated as a tax and customs site. So there will be the ability for that tenant to leverage the tax incentives to help to build it, and as we go forward, there will be opportunity to leverage the customs advantages, primarily for the tenant, but we think there is a margin there for other people to make use of that facility. That's something we're currently negotiating. Okay, if I can have the next slide, please, Jasmine. If you want to come on the site, you're going to need to help us to achieve our ambition. We do have a focus on particular sectors. We do have a commitment to creating high quality employment. We've therefore set out some high-level principles, and you can see that I don't really want to read through all of them, but essentially we're looking for businesses that can make good use of the tax and customs incentives. We're looking for businesses that are prepared to commit to participating in our skills and employment plan, who can commit to things like a good employment charter, and who are basically going to help us deliver on our ambition to deliver a large number of high quality jobs which we need for the future. We are targeting particular sectors. We're particularly interested to be hearing from people who are operating in the marine, defence, space sectors, and very much people who are involved in advanced manufacturing, developing high tech and high value products. that's not to say that we wouldn't consider proposals from people outside those sectors. We would be interested in hearing from people who feel that they can contribute to delivering our vision, even if they're not within those sectors. We would like people who are able to contribute to our research and development effort, and people indeed who can benefit from the research and development efforts that we will be carrying out on our hotbed of innovation at Southyard. And we'd like people to be able to show that they've got current and planned investment in research and development around those strategic sectors. And last but not least, we're about making green, clean growth, and we very much want people who are prepared to commit to helping us achieve our net carbon zero targets. Thank you. If I can have the next slide, please, Jasmine. So not everybody can be inside the tax and customs zones. So what are the benefits for people who don't locate within the tax and customs zones? We see the free zone as being something which can really provide a transformational impact on the regional economy. So it's not just about the people who are within those sites. They will be a core of super clusters, if you like, around sectors where we know there's high potential for growth. But they will bring with them substantial supply chains. And there are a number of benefits, I think, which businesses outside the zone will get. So first of all, the free zone does shine the spotlight on Plymouth. The government will hopefully then see it as an innovative location where they can invest and locate. So other government funding streams like Levelling Up and the various new incentives announced by the Chancellor in the budget will be things we look to benefit from. The inward investment we get from the additional businesses coming into the free zone will help to boost our regional economy. And what's good for the regional economy is generally good for all the businesses located within that area. I've talked a little bit about super clusters, but the skills has been a feature of the morning's discussions, and our investment in skills will not just benefit businesses within the tax and customs sites, but it will be of a benefit to wider businesses across the region. The innovation services that we develop to service the free zone will also be of benefit to businesses across the region. And one of the things we really are interested to hear is how can we leverage that, and how can we make sure that businesses inside and outside the free zone benefit from the research that we get involved in. We know already we've got enterprise zones in the region. We know that they can act as a catalyst for investment. And not least the very example of the free zone. Already having Ocean's Gate was a significant advantage in terms of being able to bid for the free zone, and the free zone will serve in a similar way when we're looking to bid for other schemes. And we do need our gateway policy, because we need to ensure that the businesses setting up within the zone are a good fit. And that will help to ensure that we deliver the other benefits, and that we deliver the high value jobs and lifetime skills, which will be of benefit to the whole community. Thank you, Jasmine. If I can have the next slide. Okay, so just to wrap up on that, what's the timeline as we go forward? So between now and next April, we'll be establishing our free zone entity. We're looking at the moment as the most likely choice will be a limited company of some kind. We'll be developing our tax and customs sites, and we're not actually going to have bulldozers on the ground until after April, but there is a lot of additional work we need to do before we can get to that point. We'll be looking for and seeking to appoint a customs operator, and we have to go through a approval process with HMRC to activate our customs sites, so we'll be doing that. The really big piece of work for the free zone team, of which I'm a member, is to develop and submit the full business case. And I just want to touch on that, because I've sensed a certain amount of frustration for the morning about a lack of engagement, and the government's expectation is we're delivering this at huge pace. This was only the twinkling of an eye, if you like, in January this year. So we've come an awful long way in 11 months. It's been hugely intensive. So I think I'm sure I can speak on behalf of the team in saying if you feel we haven't engaged enough, it's not because we don't want to. It's capacity and being able to meet all of the demands that are being placed on us as a team to get these things over the line. And we are very happy to engage and talk to anyone who has a serious interest in the free zone. There is an email address which I'll pop into the chat in a minute, which anyone who's interested in talking to us about it is welcome to drop an email into, and we'll do our level best to get back to you as soon as we can. We will be finalising our investment schedule. We have largely done this. We've got the capital in hand, more or less, that we need to take this forward. But there is more to do in terms of finalising our plans. So we'll submit our full business case in April. The target date at the moment is the 13th of April. And it's then in the hands of the Department for Levelling Up Homes and Communities as to how quickly they're prepared to give us the go-ahead on those plans. And as soon as they do, then we'll be looking to operationalise the free zone, and we should then get our Section 31 grant, delivering the £25 million worth of government investment, so that we can move on into our development phase.